Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going over this little optic that you see in my hand right now and that you guys have seen throughout the intro. This is the Aimpoint Comp M5. Now, I actually got my original one of these in about a year ago, so we've had it in for a while, been doing a lot of testing with it, and we did have an issue right off the bat that we just need to address. Now, for those of you that don't follow me on Instagram, you probably haven't seen this, but when this first came in from Brownells, who sent this out to the review, so thank you very much for them, for sending this out so we could bring you guys this video. Not this one, but the original one that was sent out rather. Basically, I turned it on and looked at it. I saw the dot for about 3 seconds and it died. So I was like, what the heck? I thought maybe a bad battery had just shipped with it, so I went over, got a new battery, put it in, turned it on. Literally the exact same thing happened. Turned on for about 3 seconds and died. So immediately I called Aimpoint, of course, customer service to see what was going on. And the gentleman that I spoke with, as soon as I mentioned what happened to him, he was like, oh, another one. And then, which I found kind of odd, right? So of course they sent out a shipping label and replaced it immediately. And we've had this one ever since. So again, just about a year now of use and really thousands of rounds through several different rifles, and we haven't had any issues with the replacement one. But a funny thing I thought about that conversation I had with the customer service guy was he said, oh, another one. And so I did some research and I found another guy that had the exact same issue. I think it was over on ar15.com, and he stated that the guy at Aimpoint that he talked to said that they had a real small batch go out with bad electronics. Now, the good news on that is that, of course, you realize it immediately when you turned it on if you had one, but it's not good. Of course, you would always want something to never have any issues, but I want to be upfront here and I just tell you guys how it is. So that's what happened. That's the story of it. But what we're going to talk about today is the replacement one that's been out and that I've had again for about a year now, and we're going to go over features of it, some things that differentiate it between other Aimpoints out there, and then of course at the end what I think of it overall. But we're going to let the dogs take a look at it, make sure it's good to go, and then get into those details. Getting into the optic itself, it does take your standard Aimpoint micro bases. So if you look up under this Midwest Industries mount, you guys can see those screws in there. Those screws are moving into the base of the optic, and this one here is made out of 7075 T6 aluminum as opposed to the earlier micros, which were made out of 6061 aluminum. What that does here is it allows the actual optic body itself to be tapped, so there aren't heel coils in there like there is on the H2 and the T2. So just something to point out there. If you're going to put those screws in there, which I would imagine most folks are, I personally ran a little bit of purple Loctite on there just to make sure they stay and don't move under recoil. Now, obviously we have our battery compartment up top. We will get into that here in a good bit of detail. Our windage and elevation adjustments here are shrouded just like they would be on the T2, so it gives you just a little bit more impact protection than you would have with, say, the older T1s, which we'll show you here in just a second for comparison. And you guys can see that the actual sight adjustment tool is built into the cover, which is nice, just like, again, some of the other micros out there. Now, both your windage and elevation, each click is going to be 0.36 inches at 100 yards. Now, I realize that's not exactly super US friendly, but just think about a third of it MOA. And as you guys can see up under the actual caps, it will tell you which direction you are actually moving that dot in. The clicks are very tactile. You absolutely know when you move one click, there's plenty of feedback there, so no issues in that regard. It does come with both front and rear lens covers. The rear is going to be clear, at least on mine anyway, and the front is a solid black. You can flip them up into place. Some folks like to have those flip up. I prefer them to flip down. Sort of a personal preference thing there, but you can pull them off as well should you choose to do so. On the rear here, you'll see that we do have the threading on the back of the housing, and it's also milled in for the scope caps to click into place both on the rear and on the front. Now, something you're going to probably notice here from looking at this one is that the front lens on this optic here has a protective lens in front of it. So that's going to do a few things. Number one, it's going to give you a little bit more durability and impact resistance. It's also going to give you a little bit more submersion capabilities as compared to the T2, for instance. So with your M5 here, you're going to be submersible down to 150 feet as opposed to with the T1 and T2 series, which was 80 feet. Since I opened the Pandora's box into comparisons with other Aimpoint models, let's just dive right into that. So I did do a T2 review a while ago, and that one had to go back because it was a test and evaluation model. I actually have an H2 that's serving on my primary home defense rifle right now, so didn't want to pull that off. We're going to go with the T1 for a primary comparison, but there are some differences between the T1 and the T2, of course. We'll just cover them real quick. We do have protective coverings on the T2 of your windage and elevation. You also have much better optical clarity, less blue tint, and so on. Now, for all intents and purposes, the optical portions that are improved with the T2 versus the T1 and H1 are in the Comp M5. So with that, you have the same very crisp 2 MOA dot on there. And again, you're going to have some blue tint here with the Comp M5, but you're going to have much less than you did with like the T1, Comp M4, H1 series of Aimpoints. So that's just something to get out of the way, I suppose. But the biggest difference that you're going to see just looking at it is going to be that battery compartment. So on the top right here on the Comp M5, you guys can see that we do have a large AAA battery compartment versus the 2032 battery that you have here on the Aimpoint, on the T1 rather, excuse me. Now, from what I understand, they went with the AAA battery for this one because some folks who were overseas, whether they be government agencies, foreign militaries, etc., were having a harder time sourcing the 2032 batteries locally, and the AAAs were just around in a lot of places more so than the other 2032s. Now, it ships out with a Duracell battery. Couple things on that. One downside of a AAA versus a 2032 battery is that it has a capability to leak every now and then. I should also point out there, since we have it off, that we have nice lubricated threads and double O-ring sealant on there. But AAA batteries, just their very nature, can have some leakage problems. Now, one way to mitigate that is to use a lithium battery. And one thing that that lithium battery is going to do is also extend the battery life of it. And with this optic on the 7 setting, which is what I would personally use for general duty use down here, you're going to get 5 years of battery life. That's with their standard Duracell battery that it ships with. Now, again, with that lithium one, you're going to get increased battery life. So 5 years is a long time. It's not really anything to sneeze at. Of course, you're getting the same here with the 2032 battery, just sort of in a smaller package. Now, just from the shooter's perspective looking at it, my initial thoughts on this as a right-handed shooter primarily is that I really don't care either way. It doesn't really obscure my field of view in any way, nor my peripheral vision. But as a left-handed shooter, or for me when firing from the off shoulder, I think this battery compartment here on the T1s and T2s does sort of, I guess, block your peripheral vision a little bit more than this does, because of course your eye is going to be in line with the optic, and there's just a little bit more material here. It's probably negligible, but it's just something to point out since we're comparing them. I should also note that the Comp M5 here has 4 night vision settings and 6 daylight bright settings versus the T1, T2, which is going to have 8 daylight settings. Now, in terms of that, I don't know if I can catch it here on camera, but basically the last 3 daylight settings on the T2, you're going to have a little bit of a ring around the outside of the optic in normal lighting conditions. I guess I can't get my camera to focus on it right now, but you guys can probably see some of that red washing out there, and that's just because it's so stinking bright. Really, even in super bright conditions, I've never really turned it up above 8, because beyond that, it really does get insanely bright. You'd have to be like out in the middle of the desert to need it to be that bright, at least in my opinion. The weight on the Comp M5 is going to be 5.2 ounces versus the T1 or T2. It's going to come in right at 3.7 ounces. Now, one thing you can do to reduce the weight here on the Comp M5 is going to be to, again, use that lithium battery that I talked about versus your standard AAA. That's going to actually save you 4 grams. Might not seem like a lot, and really in the grand scheme of things, it's not. But hey, I know a lot of guys out there with the ARs are really trying to save weight, so it's just something to throw out there. Another aim point to compare it to, of course, would be the Comp M4 that we have here. This is sort of the granddaddy of the Comp M5 in terms of overall layout. You guys can see it's pretty similar in terms of the way it's laid out. It's just, of course, much smaller. It's about 40% shorter here with the Comp M5 versus the M4, and of course the overall package is going to be smaller and lighter all the way around, but similar setup overall. And my camera is not focused to the red dots, but one thing I will tell you for sure looking at them side by side is that the Comp M5 has a much crisper dot versus the Comp M4, and honestly I don't think I would have noticed it if I wasn't looking at them side to side, because I've never noticed the M4 to have a not crisp dot, if that makes sense. But looking at them side to side, the M5 is crisper for sure, and with a magnifier you really can tell. I'll roll in an image here hopefully from my camera that'll let you guys kind of see just how crisp that dot is, but it's pretty impressive. It's equal to my H2 or T2. I wouldn't say it's any better because I don't think it is, at least not to my eyes, but it's definitely among the crispest rather of the red dots I've seen. The last red dot we'll compare it to today is going to be the Trijicon MRO, because I know you guys would ask if I didn't. Now these are both probably like the two high-end red dots that are newest to the market. So they have a lot of, current up-to-date features on them. One thing that I know a lot of shooters like, I mentioned it briefly earlier, was to have the battery compartment sort of above the shooter's eye. Some folks say that they like it and it's a less occluded sight picture. So they both have that feature for them. Now the MRO is going to have a wider field of view when looking through it than the Comp M5, 18 millimeters here versus 25 here with the MRO. Pros and cons there. The MRO, at least this particular model, which is not the current version that's out there. I think they updated them after like the 90,000 serial number, and this one is well below that. But anyway, this one is going to have a relatively blue tint versus the M2. A lot of red dots out there are going to have a bluish tint, and that's just due to the coatings that they put on there. My MRO, my personal one, is going to be a little bit more blue here than the Comp M5. I'm sure the camera won't be able to really quantify that, but just telling you how it looks, at least to my eye. I'm sure some of y'all are asking yourself, why wouldn't I just get a T2? That is a very valid question. In fact, I think it's an excellent question. The T2 is a fantastic optic, one that I recommended in the past. I still recommend highly to this day. Like I said, the H2 is on my primary home defense rifle, so I absolutely think highly of the series for sure. There are some advantages, though, to the M5 for some folks. Again, the AAA battery, we kind of beat that horse to death. If it's an advantage for you, it is. If it's not, then it's not. I think for most folks in America, it's not an issue. But if you're overseas, or some people just have stockpiles of AAAs, then it could be an issue for you. So you have to make that call. I do like the dial better on the Comp M5. That said, it's not really an issue on the T2 either, but I do like this. It's just a little bit easier and more positive, in my opinion, to adjust versus the T2. Very crisp dot, just like the T2 in that regard. You are going to add a little bit more weight here, but you do get a little bit more in terms of durability, which I realize is an insane statement to make, because the T2 is just very, very durable, and 99.9% of us would never have a durability issue with it. But with this, you get, again, the 7075 T6 aluminum versus 6061 on the T2. You also get that front lens there to protect it from impact, which, again, for most of us, not an issue. But say you're a patrol officer and you have to drive your rifle through some windows or something like that, it could be an issue. Really, I think the T2 would do just fine like that. But any other extreme circumstance you could think of, if you're out there scuba diving with it and you want to go down deeper than the T2 can go, this will do it. And for those that don't read online gun publications all the time and have normal jobs, this one here did go head-to-head with the T2 for the Swedish military contract last year, and it did win, and that was because of the Swedish military finding that this one was on the extreme edge of durability, a little bit more durable. So again, for most of us, it's simply not going to matter, and the T2 will be just fine, as will the Comp M5, but some folks just want that extra edge of durability. So if you do, that's up to you, and really only you guys can decide. Now, this optic is not inexpensive like all of the Aimpoints are. This one here over at Brownhouse comes in just over $800. So again, not inexpensive at all. Of course, if you guys are watching over on Facebook or Full30, we will put links to it and coupon codes down below to get you guys the best price here on YouTube. If you guys are watching there, we can't post links down below with coupon codes anymore due to their rules. So it is what it is, but very expensive optic for sure. And again, really only you guys can decide if it's what you need or what you want. Now, before I close the video, I want to say a thank you to Brownells again for sending this out, but also for not being mad about the fact that I posted the original video I did where it didn't work. Now, some companies would be mad about that, either Aimpoint or Brownells, but the reality is lemons happen with all things. It's just how it is. And at that time, that was a brand new optic. Like, it was one of the first batches to go out. So they were cool with it, didn't say anything about it, and I appreciate that, because again, certain companies would be mad, but that's just how I roll here. I tell you guys how it is. You know, when guns have malfunctions, I say it. When they don't, I say it, and you guys argue below in the comment section about it in every video. It's just how it goes. But I wanted to, again, thank them for sending it out, but also thank you guys for supporting the channel and what we do here. Thank you for subscribing. If you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do so. But thank you very much for everywhere that you guys are watching out there. If you have comments, questions, you can post them down below in the comments section or over at my Facebook page, which generally is the best way to get in touch with me. Either way, thanks again, guys, and I hope to see all of you in the next video.